Today I'm going to do a tutorial showing you how to draw a rose in colored pencil. Hi, I'm Lisa, the artist behind Lachri Fine Art. For today's tutorial, I'm working in Luminance and Polychromos colored pencil on Fabriano Artistico Extra White hot press 140-pound watercolor paper. For the tutorial itself, I'm only going to be talking you through one of these roses. That way I could slow the video down quite a bit, but the other two are done pretty much the exact same way. If you are supporters over on Patreon, make sure to head over there where the 2-hour version of this tutorial, where I'm going to talk you through all 3 roses, is available for you guys now. Now let's get on to this demonstration. I have started out with a very accurate drawing, which is so important when working with colored pencil. I drew this out with a 4H pencil so that it's very light. You don't want to use a regular like number 2 pencil or something that's dark because it's going to show through the colored pencil. Most of these colors are very translucent, so you don't want that outline showing through, which is where the very light, like the 4H pencil, is so helpful. I'm doing everything in multiple layers. I add several layers, I'd say 3 to 5 layers. I'm blending from one color to the next, and then I will blend that out with Mona Lisa odorless paint thinner. Now I did use Gamsol on the second rose, and I noticed absolutely no difference. So if you can't get the Mona Lisa odorless, but Gamsol is available to you, while it is more expensive, it works exactly the same. Dry time, everything was the same. Now, when I draw roses or even the leaves here, I look at everything in terms of abstract shapes. If you try to look at this as a leaf and just make it look like a leaf, chances are it's going to come out looking very cartoony. Instead, I'm paying close attention to my reference photo. I'm paying attention to where those lights and those darks are, and I'm just copying what I see there. I'm not looking at it as a leaf, though. I'm looking at it as just random shapes. I zoom whatever my reference photo is in quite a bit. I work from my monitor, so I can just blow that area up so I can really see all of the detail in there. Now, for the leaves here, I'm not adding a ton of detail because this is not where I want the viewer's attention to be. I really want the viewer focused on the center of the roses, so these leaves are slightly out of focus. And the reference photo, I used my macro lens anyway, so they were out of focus on the reference photo as well, which made it a little bit easier for me to know how blurry I wanted them. Now for the rose, I am going to start with the body of the rose, the outside edge, which was actually a white portion of the rose. But even though when you looked at it, it seemed like it's white, it really wasn't. It was actually various shades of pale pink and peach colors. So I'm going to lay that in. I'm outlining the edges of the rose and just very lightly filling that in with the pencil. I'm using the Luminance pencil there. They've got some great cream and rose colors. I blended that out with the Mona Lisa odorless paint thinner. I let it dry, and then I went on top of it with the Derwent Drawing Chinese White, which softened everything up very nicely. Now, while I am putting some of the veins in that outside flower petal, I'm not going too crazy with them because, again, that is not where I want the attention of the viewer to go. And if I put too much detail there, that's where the eye is going to be drawn to. So for the actual petals themselves, I'm outlining them. And I'm actually using a fair amount of pressure with the pencil here. I want those outlines very, very crisp for those petals. Normally, that is not how I work in colored pencil, but when drawing flowers or drawing roses in this case, where the outside edges are going to be darker anyway, just because of the way that I'm going to shade them, it's easier if I just go ahead and use a heavy hand, outline it, and then you go back to using a light hand to fill it in. Now notice that I'm using multiple colors here. I'm not just taking one shade of red and using that for the entire inside of the rose. If I were to do that, it would look very flat. In order to make this look realistic, I'm using many shades of orange, reds, and pinks. You can see the inside that I'm working on there. That is actually a white portion of the rose, but it's picking up the reflection of the red on the inside of the petal that is behind it. And so even though that's a white petal, you can see how dark I've got to go to get the realistic look of the shadow in there. Now again, for the next petals, I'm outlining those, filling them in, and then I'll blend that out with paint thinner. Now nothing that I've completed so far is finished. I'm going to come back through and add details and layer a lot of colored pencil on top of this so that I can get my colors, especially those reds. I want them to be very rich. If I leave them like they are now, it's fairly flat. That's not going to look so great in the end. So I've got to continuously build up both my shadows, my highlights, and additional colors on top just to brighten up my colors. Now you want to pay attention on any of the flower petals that are folded backwards or curving out. Make sure your lights and your darks, your shadows are in the right place and your highlights are in the right place, because that's what makes it look like that petal is curved. If you just put random highlights all over the place, yeah, great, you've got highlights, but they're not in the right place, so it's not going to make the flower look like it's curving or realistic. So this is another area. Pay attention to your reference photo, even if it means looking at it as abstract shapes. Just copy those abstract shapes correctly. Now you don't have to be 100% exact. That's one nice thing about working in roses. So if you're new to a medium or new to drawing, roses are a great way to get started because they've got tons of detail. They're going to be great practice for blending, but if you're missing a flower petal altogether, no one's really going to notice the difference. But they're great practice. So you can see I've gone through and I have outlined all of those petals. Now I use black quite a bit in my work. The thing is, I don't leave it flat black. I'm going to come back through and put red on top of anything that I put black down on so that the black doesn't feel flat. You can see I'm slowly building up those shadows. It is always going to be better to go too light than too dark to start off with. If you go too light, you can always darken up as you go. If you start out too dark, it's really hard to lighten things back up. Now you can see I'm using so many colors to build up the colors in this rose. If you're having a hard time figuring out what color to use, I always keep a scratch piece of paper next to me so I can test out what it's going to look like if I layer the peach on top of the pink versus the pink on top of the peach. Doing your layering in different orders will make a huge difference in the end result. So I like to test that out on another piece of paper first. That way I don't have any horrible surprises on my actual project. I'm using a lot of orange over the red. Whenever I'm drawing anything with a lot of reds, I'm going to layer orange on top of it. It just brightens everything up. Red has a tendency, if you're mixing white with it for highlights, which with colored pencil you're going to because the white is your most opaque, it's going to come out very flat, or very pink I should say. So what I do is once I get everything lighter, I go on top of that with a luminance orange to just pull out the brightness of the color. So instead of having that kind of muted pink color, I've got this nice bold red in the end. So all of this is just a layering process. And you can see the inside of my rose is still a little bit fuzzy. I'm going to come back through and add more details on that later. Now for the shadow underneath the rose, I'm using a very light hand. I don't want this to be dark. Once I get all of the shadow blocked in with the pencil, I'm going to blend that out with the paint thinner. When that dries, I'm going to take the Derwent Drawing Chinese White and burnish right over it. And if you're forgetting what the word burnish means, it just means I'm adding a lot of pressure in that case. So I'm flattening the tooth of the paper, but I'm getting a very smooth look. I'm using a light orange, this is actually apricot in Luminance, to go over and add some highlights on top of the red. So I'm able to get the highlights without having to use white in this case. The highlights are not going to be as bright as the white, but I don't need them to be that bright. I just need them to be lighter than the shadows next to them. And the orange, again, helps me to prevent, or the apricot color, helps me to prevent having that very muted color that I would get if I were only highlighting with white. So there's the burnishing over my shadow. Pull out a few darker areas, and then I blended it out again with paint thinner. Now the other roses are done exactly the same way. I've sped this up quite a bit so that I could have the first rose go much slower, but I'm just doing everything in a layering process. I'm outlining everything, I fill it in, I will blend it out with paint thinner. When that dries, I will layer on top of it until I get everything to look how I want it to. And as always, I'm going a little bit too light, and I will go back through and darken everything up as I work. And if you hit that stage where everything feels too muted, your colors aren't bold enough, that just means you need more layers. You're not finished yet. Remember, as you're working on roses, one of the biggest things to keep in mind are all of these petals, like the one I'm working on now, that fold outward. You've got to pay attention to where your highlights and shadows go, otherwise they're going to look flat. You can see here, there's no highlights and shadows at all in that petal. It's drawn exactly right, but it's flat. So those shadows and highlights just make such a difference in making your work go from looking cartoony, being drawn well, and looking realistic. One last thing I want to point out is the paper that I have under my hand is called glassine, and that is what I'm using to keep the white of the paper very clean so that my hand does not smudge the colors as I'm working. Thanks for watching. Again, if you are supporters over on Patreon, the 2-hour version of this video is available for you now, complete with voiceover. If you are new to my channel, I have new video critiques every Tuesday where I'm critiquing your original paintings or drawings, my own speak paintings, drawings, and tutorials every Wednesday, social media tips for artists each Thursday, and artist vlogs every weekend. So if you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe so you don't miss out on anything. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, Google+. All of those social media sites are linked below in the video description where you can keep up with news, my newest work, and see real-time clips of whatever it is I'm currently working on. I'll see you guys tomorrow. So I totally planned on only drawing one rose. I was trying to save time because I'm getting ready for a move. Actually, when this video goes live, I think I'm going to be on vacation, and then I've got a move coming up after that. I'm just so super busy getting ready for everything, so I thought, oh, I'll just draw a single rose. That way I can get this done really quickly and get more work done. So I started taking photos. I did my own reference photos on this one, and I just loved the layout of the 3 roses, so I gave up on the idea of having something done really quickly and drew all 3. If you're taking your own photos, it is so easy to get reference photos and have a white background like this. Just get a big, huge piece of white paper, lay it so that part of it's back up against the wall and parts on the ground, and then put your subject on it, and you can get just really cool shots with that white background. I used a big piece of Bristol vellum that I no longer work on, so it gave me a good use for it.